it's gone. Brody Kostecki is the king of the mountain. He got it pulled up. He made the He is now in 2024 the Repco Supercars Champion. And what a drive today.
G'day, welcome back to the Summer Cooldown Season Reviews, proudly brought to you by City Rural Insurance Brokers. I'm James Pavey, supercars.com lead journalist, with my colleague and mate, Zach Dowler. How you going, mate?
Good, thank you, Paves. Getting into the real business end of things now.
We really are, Zach. 4 teams left to talk about. Penrite Racing, Grove Racing, as some would know it as well. Fascinating season and almost a curious case of what could have been for these guys, because there were massive glimpses of performance and also huge moments of heartbreak as well. But start of the year, Bathurst 500, Richie Stanaway was equal 4th in points. Matt Payne was quick over 1 lap in the early rounds, and then what transpired across the following rounds and to the end of the season, no one could have predicted.
Almost a little bit of an enigma season for Grove Racing. Really, as you said, quite curious. On their day, absolutely breathtaking, particularly Matt Payne with that win in Townsville on that really aggressive strategy, and nearly backed it up the following race in Sydney on a equally curious strategy call, which nearly paid dividends. But it just, again, a little bit of inconsistency that really cruelled their season. And in Matt's case in particular, some really big mistakes that I guess still show that he is inexperienced as much as he is one of the real stars of the category. And then on the other side of the garage, the curious case of Richie Stanaway's solo supercars career continues. Flashes once again, but when it matters most, just couldn't really capitalise.
Before we get into too much detail, Zach, let's get a message from our partners. Our season reviews are proudly sponsored by City Rural Insurance Brokers. City Rural, a subsidiary of the Cowden Group of companies, has over 50 years' experience supporting their clients. They offer a range of specialist insurance from heavy industry to food trucks. They are your insurance pit crew. Head to cityrural.au. We've spoken a bit about Richie in our premiere New on Racing episode of this series and how there is a lot of potential still kind of yet to be realised, and that's sort of the same for Matt Payne. But there were talks at the start of the year. He was like, I would like to fight for a championship because we know we can fight for wins. But you look at the end of season standings, he was over 1,000 points behind our champion, Will Brown. That's a lot of points. So for those guys looking to next year, they know they can win races. So you're thinking about the finals, there'll be a lot of potential there to get some results. But they're bringing in some new blood in Kyle, which we'll get to in a second. But the high moments for this year for Penrite Racing, clearly you touched on that win in Townsville. That was brilliant. The way they executed that strategy and were able to put it to work was really, really strong. The next round after that, Matt Payne did it again, nearly beat Chaz Mossett in Sydney when Chaz was the clear benchmark. But it's the lows that really undid their season as well. I mean, Sandown with the crankshaft failure for Richie, which was quite frustrating because he was looking really promising in those early stages, and then Bathurst as well with Matt crashing at the cutting, Richie being fuel poor as well. A lot of moments that the team would rue, given that, they finished 4th in the team's championship. In the early days of the season, they were second. They're like, we're genuinely second. 888, pretty quick at the moment. But do you think they'll be disappointed with 4th overall?
I think so. As much as definite improvements across the balance of a whole season, as opposed to last year, they had a really strong back end of the season. Again, it's probably not quite where they want to be. And both Stephen and Brenton Grove have made no secret that they want to be right up the front, challenging. And you look at the background staff they've brought in over the course of their journey in supercars, the likes of David Couchy, Grant McPherson in particular. They've got all the ingredients there. It just needs to all combine now and really sort of get those results. And it's just not quite there yet, but you can definitely see the direction they're going.
Yeah, well, Matt got, trophies in Melbourne. You got trophies in Townsville and Sydney as well, but 9 results of 13th or worse. I mean, that sort of sums up the season. It's rocks and diamonds. Tasmania could barely crack the top 20. So he's got so much raw pace, so much raw skill as well. And it still kind of feels like that team's kind of working it out, even though they've got amazing firepower in the sheds. David Couchy, Grant McPherson, Al McVeigh, guys who know how to win races, championships, Bathursts. But Matt Payne still kind of feels like the raw product, and he's definitely coming out of his shell in the media and talking to journos like us. He's happy to throw in one-liners, and one of my favourite interviews all year was in Sydney after he passed 2 guys at turn 1, and you could find the story. They're pretty good quotes, but he's coming out of his shell, and it's sort of reflected by his upswing in performance. I mean, his rookie season last year was pretty tough. But rookie seasons always are. But his performance year on year is really impressive. But again, there'll be moments this year when they'll be like, oh man, what could it have been? I mean, to have that incident in the last race in Adelaide, unfortunately, that pushed him out of the top 5 in the championship. Tom Randall got ahead of him. So little moments like that across the season you can't really afford. And now looking to the finals as well, I mean, you just can't slip up.
No, 100%. And you look at the start of the year, Australian Grand Prix, had that tangle with Cam Waters fighting for the lead, and then copped an absolute spray from Cam Waters afterwards. And then obviously Bathurst crashing out would have been a solid result. Wouldn't have been a win or a podium, but a solid result. And that's a big bag of points you lose there anytime you have a crash. And I mean, ultimately to be the only car that doesn't finish the Bathurst 1000 on such a big points day, that's always going to hurt you. And then, as you said, in the finale at Adelaide, that incident he had as well. Again, those mistakes prove that as much as he is incredibly quick and he still is the raw product, he still makes these mistakes from inexperience. And that's going to happen when you're in the heat of the moment. But again, the Groves have a safeguard for that with Garth Tander in your corner as a mentor and a co-driver. I mean, that's a guy who's been around the block more than a few times and knows what it's like to be that young guy coming onto the scene and having these tough initial years in supercars. So, and that's also a relationship that's really starting to blossom as well. We saw Sandown 500; they were both very strong, and I mean, as I said, Bathurst not quite, but even then, Matt was provisional pole sitter on Friday. So the glimpses are there. It's just a matter of bringing them all together and to build a championship caliber season. That's, I think, the next step for Matt Payne and Grove Racing. Yeah,
they've got the puzzle. I think they're just a few pieces short at the moment, but the results sort of paint an accurate picture of that season. I mean, Richie started really well at the Bathurst 500 and then Matt just took over, really. I mean, the head-to-heads, Matt led 18.6 and the races, Matt led 13.10, which is quite interesting. You know, Richie had those moments at the start of the year, sort of had some bad luck in the middle of the year. You think about incidents like Perth when he sort of just got checked up by a gear change and got sent into the wall. But Richie's end to the season was beyond admirable for me. I thought that was really impressive, the way he was able to find pace in practice at Tassie and Sandown to top sessions in supercars. You know, that's not everyone could do that. And then to be the lead forward for most of the great race was really, really good too. But it was the front row in qualifying in the shootout at the Gold Coast that made me go, okay, Richie's going to Premier Racing next year and he's going to go there with a head full of steam. The sad part about that whole bit for me was that accident in Adelaide. You know, we didn't really get that final send-off, and Richie didn't get that final send-off from the team, which after the year that he'd had so many headlines about performance and what's going to happen next, could he even get a drive next year, you know. To have that accident qualifying, you know, he could have plugged it on the front row again and he could have been fighting towards the front, but I don't think it's at all fair to look at Richie's end-year position of 19th overall because it does not paint the right picture for him. But I think ultimately as well, Penrite Racing, they're losing a driver of high calibre, someone who's won Bathurst can get results, but they're gaining a driver with arguably the highest ceiling in supercars at the moment. Kai Allen is not even 20 years old. You've written a lot of stories about Kai this year, Zach. I mean, he's the real deal in a lot of circles. I mean, you don't impress a team like Dick Johnson Racing by accident. And now Grove have got him. The Groves have got this young guy and they have an opportunity to now mould two young guys. You know, I wrote a story the other day. It's going to be the youngest pairing on the grid for nearly 20 years. So we know what Matt can achieve, but what do you think Kai can do next year?
It's going to be really interesting. We spoke a few episodes ago about Cooper Murray, Kai Allen's former Eggleston Motorsport teammate, is joining Erebus next year. It's going to be really interesting. We've had this conversation around the office in the weeks leading up to this, is that they're two really interesting prospects for next year, because Cooper Murray could potentially have the better peaks or the bigger peaks and bigger troughs, the more standout results and the perhaps more low light results, whereas Kai could probably potentially have a more consistent season. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they sort of pan out at the end of the year. I mean, this is a guy who is the youngest ever Super 2 Series champion, which is almost a bit of a prerequisite of becoming a bona fide superstar of the Supercars Championship. And he nearly backed it up again this year. And it was ultimately a really, really tough weekend at the Bathurst 1000 that undid that championship charge, which at the beginning of the year, it looked like no one was going to touch him. So it's going to be really interesting for Kai. the thing is with Kai is he can't get too disheartened if it is a tough initiation to supercars, which it very well could be. We don't know. But at the end of the day, he's only 19 at the moment. Time's on his side. So if it doesn't work out at Grove Racing, there are going to be other teams that are going to be hunting his signature. There's no doubt about that. But I'm sure that Grove Racing are going to be doing everything they can to make sure that this partnership does work out. And who knows, if Kai does come on the scene and immediately proves himself to be a very reliable runner, maybe that could be the thing that pushes Matt Payne further forward into championship contention too. So it's going to be really, really interesting.
The good thing for the Groves, and you raise a good point there about Kai's age, they took a leap of faith on Matt Payne when he was the same age, if not younger, a few years ago. I remember he rolled out in a solo practice session at Sydney Motorsport Park, and people were like, this is a pretty big deal to give a young guy these laps. But fast forward 3 years, Matt Payne is sixth in the championship this year. He's a multiple race winner in supercars, poles, podiums. He knows how to do it. So I think the Groves can probably look to that and say, hey, we've already done it once with Matt. We can do it again with Kai. And arguably, Kai has achieved much more in a touring car to that age than Matt ever did, because Matt, had a lot of background in karts, bit of tin top stuff with Porsches and things like that. But a supercar is a different beast. And the way that Kai has been able to just get a media footprint, be confident and calm with journos and fans and sponsors, and be at a team like DJR, which has massive standards and, a lot of fans, go to a team like Grove Racing, which has same standards. They just want to win. He just seems so calm, and it's quite crazy because it's also kind of scary because I'm nearly 10 years older than him, and he's more relaxed than I am. I worry about coffee orders and things like that. And Kai's like, it's just all part of my day. I'll just get in the car and go racing. But he's really exciting for me. And the fact that he and Matt are teammates as well, they could be anywhere from around the back to literally getting 1-2s in races, in my opinion. Will Kai win a race next year?
Hard to say. Based on his trajectory and his form in Super 2, you'd say that it's almost a lock that he'll get a race win next year. But it's just so hard to do that in supercars nowadays. And we've seen with the second car at Groves, it can be a bit of a hit or miss entry. Even the first car with Matt Payne, that can be a bit of a hit and miss entry too. So I think a lot of it's going to be dependent on the team as well, how they roll out. It's going to be really interesting though. Kai's definitely got the talent to win a race, but talent can only get you so far in supercars. There's a lot of things that have to go right to get a race win at any point.
Well, Penrite Racing, Zach, they've got a massive ceiling, as we've said. 2 young guys, a combined age of about 41, which is just ridiculous to think of. But there's a lot of other teams we'll talk about in our summer cool down series, proudly brought to you by City Rural Insurance Brokers.